Good morning, good afternoon, good evening to my global family. I love this place because we're a global community. I'm just chatting with you right now because I'm just going to be pulling out my slides and I'm going to be sharing with you today's topic. And I'm going to start this morning like how I start most morning with my kids. And that would be once upon a time. I'm sure most of us love this once upon a time when we were young kids, right? So today it's an evolution of a layered story teaching all of us how to use our stories to build a business, to engage people, whether it's a one person or 1,000 persons. I mean, all of us want to do that and not just have verbal diarrhea, leaving the person. And then a lot of times when we go out and share, and then we come back and we say, oh, did I say too much? Did I take up too much time? Was I too self-absorbed with my story? So now how do we then tell stories that make people hanker upon our every single word, and that our actions and our stories basically either inspire people, make them have actions, or inform them of what we want to tell them, right? So that's the key fundamental thing, okay? So this is particular my slides for the most recent expo, and so this is for the benefit of those who didn't get to hear my sharing. Okay, now before I begin with the techniques, let me give you a bit of a background about stories. Now, stories, it's not just for today and last 3 decades, but stories are basically the ultimate operating systems for our brains. Now, we need to understand this. Stories are the ultimate language our brain understands. And that's why stories have been told since ancient times by cavemen. Now, these cavemen, when they went to hunt, right, in the day, and they came back with their kills, and they would come and sit down by the fire at night, and they would share their stories, around the fire, right? And they would share. And as young as children from 4 years old, they'll be listening to these stories, okay? Now, great stories passed down, told many, many times, become history. So from a 4-year-old, when they listen to these stories, how, their uncles or their grandparents or whatever killed had their sports and killed, or how it saved their lives. Now, these stories stick with them. Now, I'm going to ask you a question. If you were a 4-year-old child sitting by the fire and listening to stories of how they escaped a cheetah or a horde of hyenas and all that, so a 4-year-old child may not have learned to hunt at that moment because they're not able to, because the size, their food, right? But as they grew up listening to these stories, and these stories stick in their brains and possibly one day saved their lives, and these stories taught them something and saved their lives. Now, the next time, where do you think these people will sit? Which fire will they sit? The story that taught them something, inspired them, or saved their lives, right? Exactly. So we need to learn how to have stories that basically impact lives. So stories told many times becomes history, and great stories become legends. And not only that, people who told good stories become legendary. For example, legends are like the Genghis Khan. Great storytellers, I could tell you one, Christian Andersen, and the most recent great legendary storyteller in my books would be Steven Spielberg, right? Now, we all went to movies. There are movie makers, and there are great movie makers because they told great, great stories, right? So now, why are stories so powerful? As I said before, because story is the ultimate operating system of our brains. Now, stories either inform us, like as parents, we want to inform our children about some piety, morals, and culture. We told them through stories. We didn't teach them like, you have to do this because of this. We told stories. And when you wanted your child, for example, not to open the door to strangers, we told them stories as well, of how things happen and then the repercussions of all these actions. So we basically told stories, right? So stories have the power to inform, influence, entertain. You want to build rapport, icebreakers. We tell stories to make people laugh, or jokes, right? So stories have the power essentially to inspire and to communicate a language. However, there are a few key factors how we do this, okay? Now, one of them is what makes a good story. Number one is how you narrate your story through different tonality of your voice, the delivery, okay? Now, everybody can tell stories, but we need to tell them with authenticity. Now, the other thing is this, there needs to be a common thread. Now, if I'm going to be telling you a story that's totally not relative to you, you'd probably shut your mind and be thinking what you're going to have for lunch and where you're going to go next, etc. Right? So telling a story with commonality is very important. Now, some of us may or may not know that when we tell a story, before we share a story, you want to ask questions first, right? So then you can actually basically tell a story that relates to that person. If there's no relation, there's no common thread, the person doesn't remember. Okay, the next thing is sound bites. Now, sound bites are so interesting. Now, we all heard the stories, the sharings from the last speaker, and her sound bite to me was earn money while you sleep. So now, when we want to share a story, we must remember sound bites are small snippets of things people can remember. Now, if you think about stories, we all know stories like Snow White. Most girls, Snow White, Cinderella, right? Now, most of us don't really remember, for example, the full details of these stories, but people remember one thing, which is the emotion. For example, Cinderella, she was from a very sad background, and she was her mother had passed away, and she was living with the stepmom. But how she had Prince Charming. So it was the emotions that we remember. So the emotion that I remember from Mary's story is that she charged by per hour. She only earned while she was charging by per hour. And guess what? She found a way to earn it when she was sleeping, right? So isn't that like amazing? So we need to tell stories that people remember. People don't, all of us are so busy with our lives. We don't have the capacity to remember every single detail of Mary's life, Joanne's life, or Dr. Julian's life. But small sound bites. For example, my sound bite would be my team and the people around me. Oh, that's the person, with 6 friends. She already had 6 friends, but she managed to build a global business spanning 24 countries. So these are small sound bites. So when you want to share your story, now, one of the things is this. I realized being a mom, teaching my children. Now, we all read stories, but one of the hardest things in English lesson is editing to make the story more concise, summary writing. So that's very important as well in terms of us telling stories. Not everybody has the time and the bandwidth to listen to the whole verbal diarrhea. So it's important to be concise, have good sound bites. People remember these things, and only when these things sink in people's mind, then they have good memory at the same time. So the last thing is to build rapport. Now, you cannot build rapport when you cannot share with heart and soul. Now, why some people, when they tell stories, we hanker for every word is because, number one, it's relative to us, right? Like, for example, I'm looking for a way to earn more money, but I don't have the time, because I could be taking 2 jobs and trying to make a living, and I can't even afford to save, and I only have 18 hours to work. But now, guess what? Somebody out there is able to make money while they are sleeping. Will that instantly capture my attention? Yes. Will that have my trust? Yes. Will that person's story have instantly built a rapport with me? Absolutely. So what am I trying to say here? Find commonality. And the only way to find commonality and build rapport is first by listening to what they need, right? So some of you may have heard what is FORM, which is understanding the person's, number one, family needs. O stands for occupational. Are they facing job problems, retrenchment, etc., right? FOR. R stands for recreation. Like what you heard from Mary. She only can afford to travel once a year. Some people once in 2 years, right? So maybe some people have time to travel but no money. But some people have money but no time to travel, right? And M stands for money. Are they having financial issues? They don't have retirement fund. They can't pay for their children's education. And I would add two more things. H, find out the person's health, right? And you heard from Mary as well. She had health issues because most of us are exchanging time for money. So some people may be facing health issues. And lastly, I was a homemaker, but I had dreams. I had dreams to reinvent myself. So if you find out what the person's FORMHD is, then you can tell stories that evokes emotion, connects to them, have commonality. So remember, everybody can tell a good story, or everybody can tell the same story. But there must be, number one, authenticity, and number two, there must be connection of the heart and of the soul. Only then can you be a good storyteller when you combine all these to narrate stories that people can connect to. You can build rapport and make it easy for sound bites, because nobody can remember all the details, what you wore that day, how you crossed the road, and things. Nobody has the capacity to remember, because all of us, our minds are full of all the things that we have in our own lives. So make them easy for people to remember your story, all right? So therefore, keep your narrative concise, structure in a sequence for people to understand them, and then have sound bites like Mary, right? I charge by per hour. I can earn money while I sleep. Joanne's one could be, she had 6 friends, but yet she built a global business. So many people have all these developed, concise sound bites for people to remember them by, right? And then build rapport. Now, build a higher level of self-disclosure, builds deeper connection. Therefore, I use one word to summarize all this, sound bites, which is vulnerability. When you are vulnerable. Now, when you tell a story, you can either tell them in a very clinical way or show vulnerability, and then you evoke emotion. Now, why do I keep using the word emotion? Because, very simply, emotion is the glue that causes memory to stick. Now, think about it this way. Every one of us goes through life, right? If I was to ask you, what did you have for lunch yesterday? You may not remember. Or if I tell you, what did you do 31st January 1982? You won't remember. But the difference is this. If something happened on that day that evoked emotion, a bad breakup, or a fantastic result, or you ranked up, or you had a windfall, you had an emotion to it, that particular event or day will always stick in your memory. So we need to remember emotions is the glue that helps memory to stick. So if you want people to remember your story, you want people to act upon what you're sharing, because this platform is so amazing. It's changed my life. This amazing place called Jeunesse has changed my life. So if I were to share, I need to show vulnerability of the before Jeunesse, what happened, during Jeunesse, what happened, and after. Now, what have I achieved with passion, with emotion, and people can feel. So emotion needs to transcend people to where you were, what you were doing, and where you are now. Then people can understand and feel, and that's how you engage audience, whether it's one person or 1,000 persons, is using emotions. All right. So emotions, again, this is to reiterate, to summarize it, to sound bites for you, allows your audience to remember your story. Okay. Now, have we all been to example classes or, courses? Okay. And there will be lecturers and there will be lecturers. There'll be some that, you don't really remember, or teachers, but some that you will remember. Why? Now, step back and think. These people whom you remember to be great teachers or great lecturers were people who taught you with stories, because they stick in your mind, right? And some of us, when we go for talks, right? At some talks, when you go to the speaker, you're looking at a clock. When's lunchtime? When's tea break? But at other speakers, for example, when you listen to them, at some points you think, oh my gosh, time passed so quickly. Is it lunch already? Not when is lunch. But at the same time, it's like you've been listening for 8 hours. Why? Because it has transcended time and it felt like a really long time because they brought you back to where they wanted to bring you. So a good storyteller will be able to bring you back where they were, with vulnerability, with emotions, with tonality, with sincerity, with authenticity, sharing yourself. And then what you did, whether it's products, how you were before, financially or with health, and then people will remember. And when there's commonality, when people can feel you, you've built the rapport and the trust, you know what? You can now make them feel, and they will. What will they will? They will act upon it. They will feel inspired. They will remember. When people remember, they will ... what you had wanted them. What was your purpose of that story? So one other thing that you need to remember is when you have heard the person's basically FORM issues and you want to share a particular story. Now, all of us have gone through experiences and a wealth, an archive of so many stories. You don't want a verbal diary to tell stories A to Z, but you want to tell pick from your archive relative stories that will be compelling and to cause people to be inspired, cause people to be informed, cause people to remember, and to evoke particular actions or emotions, right? But you need to remember to pick the correct stories from your archive, number one, and then tell them with emotions, with vulnerability, right? And then but you must relate it. It must be relative to what's going on in their life right now so that it is relevant to them and that they will listen, okay? And when they will listen and they can feel, they will. So I'd like to share with you finally, and that you must remember these, that we all have a huge inventory of stories. We just need to pull out the right ones to connect with our audience through commonality. Okay? So with this, I'm going to ask you, what's your story? Now, I need you to remember that with every incident, you need to be concise and craft the stories in your mind. And before you share your story, you need to ask, what was the purpose and intention of this particular story? Always have your purpose in mind. It's a start point. Then you share your story so that your story can make an impact, can engage, can inspire. So we need to understand how we can use the various stories that we have, position them to engage your audience through emotions. Okay, so I hope that this particular sharing has helped you in your journey, whether it is to promote yourself, your business, or anything, because stories have the power to influence in a very, very large scale. So use them to your advantage. And with this, I wish you all a pleasant, blessed week, and start to evoke all these emotions within you and start sharing your story. So thank you so very much for listening in today. I really hope that these sharings would be helpful to you, because we all know that facts tell, stories sell. Facts tell, but stories sell. And they sell not just anything, but what you want to tell others. So with this, thank you so much and have a blessed week ahead. Thank you.